Hey everyone, welcome to Creative Leaders Unplugged. I'm Morgan, here with Arna, to the podcast brought to you by Future Skills Academy. Today we're talking with Clive Grinyer, uh,
Yeah.
has done, is doing many fascinating things. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Uh, I I love his energy
yeah,
and his optimistic energy. His yeah. There's something about he's so eager and there's so much going on and yeah. Um,
yeah. And I typically only see that with like really young designers. So it was a nice breath of fresh air because right off the bat you could feel it with him as well.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. He's doing things. He has so many cool kind of things on his resume, but also, I'm really excited. So he's writing a book, which is going to come out in January next year, which is something to look forward to. He's one of those people that, he really has a voice in the world of design
Yeah.
slash service design, which we want to hear from and we listen to because of his industry experience, right? So he's not he's been inside of all these large systems like Barclays and
Mhm.
Orange, and so it's really cool to have him. He's both an insider and an outsider, if you will, right? So he has all that and having that optimism and that, yeah. So I don't know. I was really inspired. um, yeah.
Yeah, he has a lot of, he's almost a little bit of I got a little bit of a philosopher. Like he'd have
Yeah.
insights or these ways of looking at things. So there are a lot of little nuggets that I'll be taking away from the conversation
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because of because if you have that much experience, being part of all kinds of organizations and within in all kinds of positions, and um, you start kind of seeing patterns, and so you have there's a kind of a wisdom there that underpins sort of what he's saying. That's why he's so interesting, because it's not just,
Yeah,
I have an opinion, but I have an opinion based on all these things that I kind of did.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So hope you guys are also inspired and yeah.
Yes. All right. Enjoy.
Um, I think that I am somebody who is highly curious about the world, with an ambition to always make it at least a little bit better, which I think is a trait that we find in lots of people who call themselves designers. I certainly do call myself a designer, but don't want that to be used as prejudice against me, which it can be. But I like the idea that I think about things, even minute things, with an attempt to create them better. And I really enjoy motivating, inspiring people around me. It doesn't have to be me that designs it better, but I want to inspire others to create things that are better. And I do that by being rather over energetic and smiling too much.
You
Is,
just walk
is
into
there?
a room, show them your smile, and they're like, "Oh, I have the design now."
It's very funny. So it's really interesting to hear you say, make the world a better place, improve things. Because exactly what you're saying, I think a lot of people, designers, specifically creatives, they feel like they need to kind of make the world a better place, me including. Uh, um, but and I'm hearing you say that. I wonder, is there a moment where you go like, yes, I'm going to make, where did that start? Because I don't think as a kid you go like, I'm going to make the world a better place, or do you, or when does that
Well,
realization happen?
it's a brilliant segue into something I was thinking about just before I came onto this podcast. I was trying to remember at what point did I think that you could make the world a better place, and
Exactly.
then discover that perhaps this bunch of processes and approaches that we call design might be key to that. And it was actually as a schoolboy, a school kid, in my not particularly brilliant school, comprehensive school in the UK system, that had an art department, and in the art department, the art teacher had a lot of magazines lying around, including Design magazine. I mean, when do we ever pick up a print copy of anything anymore?
Exactly.
But in those days,
What's a magazine? Can you explain to the listeners
yeah,
what a
that's
magazine
right.
is?
It's paper.
Yeah, it's like,
There's words on it
ooh,
and
sounds very,
pictures, importantly.
very innovative.
And of course, Design magazine was I didn't know about it then, but it was created by the UK Design Council, whose job it was to help us all be slightly more aware of the way things were designed and improve Britain's post-war performance. I'm not sure if it did that, but it tried. And on, when I say better, I don't just mean solving world crises. I mean making very small things better, because on the cover of that magazine was a plug, a mains electricity power plug. And I just thought, what? Why would something so mundane and boring? And inside was an article on how the mains plug had been designed to simplify the way you connected it up, so that perhaps older people could find it easier, but then we all found it easier. To be easier to pull out of the wall and push into the wall. And it also looked beautiful, a beautiful plug. And I was just amazed that something so mundane was designed. And of course, later on in life, I realized everything is designed just usually without any thought or just copying,
Yeah.
I mean, when did anyone think of a mains plug? But there was this article and this picture on a magazine. And honestly, I think my world changed in that moment. The idea that every little thing around us, somebody had on a drawing board at some point, and it was a drawing board. I'll explain a drawing board if listeners want to know what that was. But that was absolutely, I can remember it clear as if it happened yesterday, this idea that there was all this stuff and it had come from somewhere and it used materials and people had to think about its shape and form and why it was there. And as I say, that was a moment of total revelation. So when I say make the world better, I include mains plugs in that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's
And
interesting.
suddenly there's so much in the mains plug, materials and inclusivity and ergonomics. It's incredible when you start digging down.
Yeah, exactly. Culture, everything.
Yeah.
It's all in there.
Anti-competitive practice. The UK wouldn't go to the European route when we joined the European market because they didn't want to change. So they British standards was invented to keep the Europeans out.
Yeah,
I mean, it's everything there.
It's working. So well done. Well done.
I'm sorry, everybody.
That keeps things exciting. So no, but it's interesting because I think a lot of I don't know if other people had that realization, but I think if you are sort of interested in design or in design or I remember for instance when I started becoming interested in things like graphic design as well, I had kind of similar kind of I remember like my I think my mother asked me one day sort of what exactly do graphic designers do, and I said, well, it's kind of funny if you think about it, because if you just walk around the streets or anywhere you see sort of something, it can be anything, like you see a font, letters, like, the things on traffic signs, stuff like that. And it's just, if you think about it, even graphic design is everywhere. And then I sometimes I do an exercise when I have a group of people just to kind of make them aware of the importance of design when they're kind of doubting it. I say, okay, now we'll do an exercise. Look around, look at yourself, and look around. Now take away everything that is designed, bad or well designed, doesn't matter. But somehow it's designed by a human being. Okay, kind of imagine leaving everything out, just deleting it. Erase it. Where are you? Like I think you're in a forest or something, or like everything is. Somewhere it is designed. There's nothing left. There's architecture. There's your wallpaper. There's your desk. Your clothes. I mean, everything somehow is design. So
It's interesting. And actually, you mentioned clothes. So another big motivation for me was my grandmother had a dress shop in a little village in what we jokingly call the New Forest in the UK, which is, of course, over 1,000 years old. Comparatively new.
yeah,
Anyway, and she and my mother used to go up to London every few months and return saying, "Next summer will be blue." And I'm, what? What? How's that? How's that? You know, and slowly you realize that they're going to fashion shows and they're seeing the work of designers actually who are, you know, taking our whole culture and fashion on a course. Because later on I realized that fashion is our great curse, because I still find on a day-to-day basis that everyone assumes when I say I'm a designer, I'm a fashion designer. And of course, you know, I'm currently and have been over the last few years working in everything from prisons to the health service to fire and rescue services last week. Nothing to do with fashion design. But that idea that we form things and they have such a massive impact on us was a big moment as well. And recently I've been going into schools and talking about that. And funnily enough, I've been talking about Margaret Calvert and her road signage, because nobody imagines there's something as mundane as a road sign, and a motorway sign, you know, was designed and prototyped and iterated and all the things we do. And school kids actually really like that. They really wake up to that when you point out the world is designed exactly as you say.
Yeah. And you know, the psychology behind those designs is amazing, and sort of, you know, the human behavior, and it's such a service design. And I actually do want to go back to your childhood, because I'm really interested in how you kind of developed that and matured that thinking. But just to kind of just one thing about service design, which I think for a lot of people service design did something like that to a lot of young people. At least when I started getting into service design, I wasn't that young, but in the community, there were a lot of kind of people just graduated from a maybe design school or not, but they started were realizing that you could design a service, which now sounds like, but at that time it wasn't clear. So to me, I all of a sudden, and specifically in the UK, I remember there were a lot of young people who were all of a sudden completely into designing things like elderly care or public transportation, for instance. And because I came from communication design, advertisement, that part of the world of design, to me it was like those were the boring things. The great thing, that was not the sexy thing you wanted to do, because that's so like why would you be interested as a young designer in public transport? It's like, no, you want to work for the big brands and make these flashy things. And not that was me, but that was the world I kind of knew. And I'm like, whoa, that opened my eyes as well. I was like, wow, that's so amazing. We are we allowed to get into that? Are we allowed to go and say, wait a minute, we can improve that with the way we think and our creativity, and we can, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So
that's a good point. It's a great point. It's quite a step, isn't it? I mean, I ended up being a product designer, but I remember as I sort of got past my moment of epiphany with the mains plug and my grandmother's dress shop. Though interestingly, I now realize that was a fantastic piece of service design, in that the performance of my grandmother in her dress shop was extraordinary. And, you know, and you realize, you know, certainly in retail, you have that sense of theatre when you deliver a service of just selling a dress. And she would, you know, go and get the Vogue magazines, put them in the window, and then you'd look up and there would be the same dress, and you'd be like, oh, I could own this. You know, it was a brilliant piece of theatre that she constructed. But later on, I kind of was very confused about, and of course completely ignorant of what design was, and had some sort of weird desire to do something in the public space, that I thought it was something like art in the public space. So I'd fully anticipated that I would become a painter of murals in city centres. This was the only way I could think about doing art publicly in a way that might cheer people up as they went shopping or something. And it was a very limited, and of course, it was just completely ignorant of the profession of design. And I was very lucky. At about, I guess I was 17 or something, we had a careers person come in again to the art department, actually, amazingly. And I was chatting to her and talking about how I thought people in factories should be able to, their machine should be like a bingo machine or something. It should be fun to use. And she obviously thought I was completely mad, but also said, I think maybe you should be a product designer. Maybe you should design things, and try and cheer people up that way. So that was, I'm obviously never heard of product design, never occurred to me one could do that. But that was, again, to drive towards product. And I consider myself lucky that I actually went to product, not graphics. Nothing against graphic design, I'll explain.
Mhm.
Sorry, Arna.
For me, I mean, I was definitely more interested in the physical interaction with the world. But in going into product design, you are plugged into some quite complex systems. Excuse me. You have to understand materials and how materials are processed and manufactured. You have to understand economics. Can we justify tooling up for something, or do we have to build each one individually because we're only going to sell 5, or are we going to sell 5 million? What's the price of labor? Can you really print the logo that way, or does it destroy the economics? You always, every decision is tied in with so many other parts of the system that I think it's why quite a lot of people trained as product designers end up doing service design, because we're kind of realize you have to do a lot of thinking before you can put pen to paper or mouse to screen. And that's quite a good discipline, I think. And you start understanding the complexity of the world. And there were times as a young product designer when I had to, fight to have the right to put a radius on something because the process might not have allowed me to do it. And then you'd say, well, do you want someone to cut their hands when they're going to use your computer keyboard? And so you'd have this discussion all the time, this trade-off between the human, the material, the process, the cost. And I think that's incredibly useful training for what I've ended up doing in the sort of broader service design world. That's how I see it anyway.
And when I think back, because of course, like product design has really evolved. Our understanding of design has really evolved. When you were in school to be a young product designer and make the world a more happy place, and you said it was a process, or a kind of like a fight to choose between, okay, human or process or material, or
Yeah.
What school of thought do you feel like you were educated in, or what was really the thing that you felt that they were pushing at the
Yeah.
time?
Well, the craft of design is obviously hugely important, but when you are trained as a designer, you are kind of, you're thinking quite superficially at times. You're thinking about form and color and the things that are cool, look cool. And again, this is definitely going to be a podcast about all my epiphanies. Another epiphany. Same project had a couple of massive epiphanies for me, actually. It was at Central, in those days, Central School of Art and Design, now Central St. Martin's, during what was then called industrial design, in brackets engineering, definitely called product design now. Though, of course, product now means something digital, not just physical. And I had, it was a project for the Royal Society of Art Student Design Awards, and they wanted to do something on the street, like a street piece of street furniture that also had an electronic angle to it. Quite a confused brief. I don't know where it came from. So I did 2 things. I designed a bus stop with all the cool materials, all the cool shapes of the day, and an architect called Michael Glickman, who sadly passed now, but he came in as a tutor. And he just said to me, do you want to stand in that bus stop? I thought, oh, blimey, he's right. It's cool, but it's horrible. So that was a big moment. The other big moment was when I did the electronic part of it. I did a bus timetable. And I designed it for somebody who was drunk at 2 a.m. I didn't realize I wasn't inventing personas, but I was using what I would later call personas to imagine somebody else. and I designed an interface that did not require a keyboard, because how would you spell Piccadilly when you're not from Britain and you're drunk at 2 a.m. in Piccadilly?
Yeah, exactly.
So I was trying to play these scenarios and think, I need to design something that is actually usable in this quite extreme case. And that actually got me I won the student prize. I also had this idea of, I'd been to Sea London Transport, and they had mentioned that they knew where the buses were. They could track them. And I said, oh, that's amazing. You know, what do you use that for? And they said, well, you know, predicting journey times. I said, well, could you have a display on the bus stop that told you how soon the bus was coming?
Yeah.
And then
Oh.
a few years later, up that pops. You know, I'm not saying I invented it, but it was interesting to have the conversation for me as a designer to realize that data could be fed back to the customer, not just be in the service of the organization. It's something that, of course, is
yeah,
and ubiquitous now. But in those days, the idea of sharing that data was not. So that for me was that whole project was massive. And then to win the Royal Society of Arts Student Design Award, there are still colleagues of mine who are angry that I won.
really,
It was a long time ago.
Our design was good too.
Yeah, exactly. We're very competitive designers. But that got me to go to Japan and travel and to actually have the confidence. I mean, the people who won the RSA bursary, people like Paul Priestman and Johnny Ive, you know, did it fuel their creative confidence, or did it identify it? I'm not sure. The jury's out, but it certainly helps. And that still is, you know, just had its 100-year birthday, the Royal Society of Arts Student Design Award. 1923, they were running a design award. I mean, that's extraordinary.
That is extraordinary.
And you know, something that we tend to forget how absolutely brilliant that has been. I'm still a massive fan of the Royal Society of Arts. So.
Yeah.
Fiver in the post from them, I hope. Yeah.
Yeah, clearly. But I think that confidence, I think that is such an important thing. You know, do you see yourself as someone who is, you know, capable of, or allowed kind of to think about these kind of things? Are you? Yeah, I think especially when it's about creativity, at least in my experience, is that specifically creative people, because ideas they come up with, it's very close to the heart, especially, you know, it's something that it's, you know, you can't really, you become really vulnerable sharing ideas, because it's like, I have this idea, and it's usually something new, because you're designing either something that is a, you know, combination of two things that weren't combined, or you come up with something new, some kind of new connection or something, and that makes it so vulnerable. So you need, I think you need a you know, community or something to say, yes, you're allowed. So, you know, is that something that you?
I think it's a brilliant point. And it's not just about your personal confidence. I realize now in telling you this story, which I haven't talked about so much in the past, is it gives you the confidence to raise ambition.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, so, you know, there was the London Transport with their data. There was me and my terrible bus stop. But you realize that people tend not to have an ambition to make things better. They tend to want the status quo.
Yeah.
They tend to want to keep things as they are. And then, say, a competitor does something, they go into a blind panic and catch up with the competitor. But they rarely go beyond that. And I think, yeah, literally just talking to you now, I realize that those sorts of things that happened to me as a young designer gave me the right to try and raise people's ambition to actually improve a better plug, a better bus stop, a better whatever it was. And I happen to be, as a designer, one happens to have a skill and a curiosity. And I often talk about curiosity and courage, especially in service design, the courage to say to people, you could do better. And this is what better looks like, because we can show people what better looks like. And I think that's a fantastic asset. And as you say, confidence to be able to do that, not just in yourself, but realize that as a designer, you can take people on a journey and they will benefit from that.
Yeah. Well, that's creative leadership.
Exciting.
That's creative leadership. I mean, that's a leadership that's stepping up and saying, hey, I see another way or another option. And so you're showing people that there are things possible that they haven't considered. So
exactly.
you're leading them to something new, and that takes courage because they are not there, and typically people don't want to change because they don't want to lose control. They know what they have, and there's this thing of loss aversion, and this idea
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
you rather keep what you have because it's so much safer to
Yeah.
have what you have and not, even though you think what the new thing might be better, but it has to be a lot better before you actually want to kind of take the risk.
yeah.
And so this
So,
risk aversion is so important. So we have people like yourself who say, well, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to show you anyway. I'm going to kind of stretch that boundary of what you think it was possible or safe. And I'm going to open this door. But that's a specific mindset. That's not just because, I mean, maybe it's designers. I don't know if it's specifically designers, but it's a kind of courage you have, at least somehow, because I'm pretty sure I have known a lot of designers, and not all designers are capable of doing that.
no, they're not.
So somewhere in, is a, so maybe, so, can you tell us a little bit about how you, so for instance, your grandmother was an inspiration, obviously, but were your parents creatives? Were they designers? Is it something that's in
Uh,
your family?
Interesting. So my father was a civil engineer. He was somebody who, he would create road bridges. So in the local town we used to drive to, I knew the names of the engineers of all the bridges along the road. Which is a bit weird.
Yeah, John did this one.
That's a Morris Porter Bridge, that's
That's
the Taylor Bridge, all this
Oh
kind
yeah.
of stuff. I could still point them out in Southampton
Oh.
if you
Oh,
want.
right.
I could do it. That'd be a really weird tour. And weirdly, I think my career as a designer has been as a rebellion against that engineering, because he did and still does, think that architecture design is kind of frivolous and irrelevant, and what's important is the engineering. And I've, as a product designer, you certainly come up against an engineering mindset, and of course, as a digital and a service designer, you come up with against people who, for all the best reasons in the world, believe they have a scientific right to tell you what right is.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a passionate belief that they don't know what right is, and that we need to do that together. And a spirit of collaboration is what is needed. And that's a big passion in my life, actually. So more as a reaction against my dear old dad. Who's ever heard of a son rebelling against his dad? Incredible.
Yeah.
But no, he was an inspiration in many ways. He was defined by his work in a way, and I'm afraid I am. Terrible, really. But he was passionate about it and had a great work ethic, and also actually had a desire. He spent a lot of time in his latter part of his professional career traveling around the world. In fact, to parts of the world you absolutely can't go to anymore, like the Yemen, for example.
Mm.
Building part of big aid packages, building fishing harbors and things like that. Of course, with hindsight, one wonders now whether those big aid packages were actually as good as they were intended to be. But at the time, he felt he was doing the right thing and helping people all over the world, build up their food industry or whatever it might be. And he was very passionate about that. So that desire to do good for others, if you like, to try anyway, was definitely something that inspired me. And my mum was a classic housewife, because that's what you were in those days. Though she did retrain and go and work in healthcare, actually, and that was also an interesting part of growing through those decades, how roles changed and
Yeah.
the world changed a lot,
Yeah. Same with my
life, as
parents.
it does.
Same.
Yeah,
Same with my parents. Exactly.
So yeah, but I think my journey into design became quite solo because it was such a new thing. I remember I was very lucky. In the UK, we have this system. You had exams when you're 16 and then exams when you're 18, which sort of set your course for university or further education, A levels, as we call them. And I went to a local sixth form college where you only went for those 2 years between 16 to 18, and it was a sort of a preparation for university. They're not much in favor anymore with education ministers, but it was terrific. And they had one of the very first design and technology courses in the country. And was a person who fell between the stools of art and science. I loved science. I wasn't particularly good at it, but I really was intrigued by it. I liked maths. I wasn't any good at it, but I liked it. And I liked art. And in Britain, still, I think, actually, there's a tremendous sort of cultural snobbery between the two, and they're very divided. You're either an artist or you're a scientist. And there's a bunch of people who often did become designers who were very much in the middle. I'm a middle brain. I never know the difference between left and right. I love art and I love science. What to do? You have to make a choice in education at this important stage in your life. And I did physics and maths, and I was going to do art, but there was this design technology course, and honestly, it felt really scary to pick that as one of my 3 A levels. You only get limited choice, but I did pick it, and I was absolutely certain everyone was going to call me a dunce. Somebody who was doing an easy course, a stupid course. But when I got on it, I absolutely loved it and excelled at it in a way I'd never excelled at anything before, because I was always between the two stools, the two camps. And that was extraordinary. And it was brilliantly taught. It was brilliantly taught by a couple of teachers there, one of whom went on to develop the whole design education system of Mexico. And he left the UK, went to Mexico.
Wow.
Absolutely. And I didn't know until later on quite how brilliant this person was, but they taught me the design process. They actually, weirdly, taught me what we now call the double diamond, the idea that you analyze and you synthesize and you create and you understand how to deliver. Of course, that's immediately, whether you call it the Stanford D's or the double diamond or whatever it is, it's essentially, this ask the question, understand before you design. And that was absolutely amazing to me. And so that set my course. That's when I realized I wanted to go to art school and try and do design, knowing absolutely nothing about it at all, because it was such a new thing. People didn't know. My parents knew nothing about it. I think they were quite worried I wasn't going to be an engineer like Dad.
Yeah.
And so it felt like a massive risk, but of course it was probably the most important thing I ever did.
Yeah.
Set the train. And design technology has suffered hugely over the last 20 years. It has been virtually wiped off the curriculum. And yet, what do we need right now? Creativity, and the inability for politicians and people to understand the skills we really need to survive AI.
Yeah.
And start answering the challenges of the world, social, environmental. They are creative skills, but certainly in the UK, I've always been worried that we have culturally very defined barriers between art and science, and design is seen as fashion and something that's very decorative and a bit of a luxury. And that's a problem when you go and talk to business. It's a problem when you go and talk to a healthcare trust, and they think you're just going to, I don't know, shape the bed or something.
Yeah.
It's more fundamental than that. And so getting that across has actually now become my life passion, has been for 15, 20 years, trying to help people understand that design is absolutely vitally important to their lives and how they make decisions.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating how we have kind of, separated things like science and art. And if you look at history, there has been a time that these things were basically, the same thing, that the one person would kind of be involved in art and in science and in engineering as well. And because completely. It's about understanding how things work and then kind of taking them apart and then putting them back together again in a novel way. That's basically what you do. And call it whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. Is like you like you said, you're curious, you want to know how things, it doesn't matter what it is. I just want to know what is it made of? How does it work? And I think so, the scientific method looks a lot like the design thinking double diamonds. I think it's the same. I'm not sure if I can say that out loud. I think it's the same thing. It is about understanding, iterating, learning, trial and error. And I think the only way we learn as human beings at any time is by trial and error. We try things, we fail, we learn from each other, we tell each other about our mistakes. So the others, so we do some storytelling, but still it is about trial and error. That's all we do. That's how we evolve. That's how we change things. And it's just that being aware of this. So I think a lot of, we need people who, and these might be creative people, but they are also people who are able to step back and understand sort of the system of things and say, hey, wait a minute, don't so I look at the complete picture of it and I start understanding how things actually work. You do that, they do that. So people who have a heads up mindset, I don't know if creativity even covers it. I think we need people to ask questions. We need people who say, because answers are there, like you said with AI. I mean, right now, if you want an answer, go to Chat GPT, ask it any question, what it has an answer for you. It goes up bleh, but and I had to think,
right, but you'll get an answer.
Exactly. But it might, you might not even know what you actually want. So it's a great tool. By the way, I'm not against it. I think it's a wonderful tool. It enables you, and I have dyslexia, so for me it's an amazing tool. So for all kinds of stuff. But the first thing is, what do you want? What do you want to achieve? What do people want? Are you solving a problem? What is the question? And I actually wrote a little article about this because I was rereading or listening actually to the audiobook of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But where they built this supercomputer and to answer that most important question of the universe and life and everything, and the answer is 42. And then they go like, oh yeah, because you don't know what the question is. Oh, I'm like, yes, that's it, right? What do you? So we have a tool. Like, I mean, photographers had Photoshop for ages. That was like, they manipulated photos and images, and there's nothing new about technology. It's like, what do you want? So I think we need people asking questions.
I think you've hit on something absolutely fundamental. And how do I build on what you've just said there in a sensible and logical and meaningful way? But it's because it's something I think I'm so passionate about. I mean, I think you say design is everywhere right at the beginning of this podcast, and you were showing examples. And I was talking about the decisions that people make before I could even put a radius on something. And I think for me now, design has become about making decisions better. And people are making decisions all the time. And initially, my feeling was, as a designer, that I needed to get up the food chain to be more of a decision, to be a leader, to have an influence at the table, to help people who were making decisions that would have an impact, only they didn't understand what that impact would be. And they might be measuring it from a scientific point of view. They were most definitely measuring it from an economic point of view. But were they measuring it from, an emotional point of view? And were they creating technology that allowed us to trust it? I spent a large number of years with Cisco, big technology company, who had tremendous faith in science, and they were talking about the internet of everything, not just the internet of things, right? And it was just incredible. Their minds were blowing up, with amazing ideas. But I had to say to them, yeah, these are great ideas, but we have to trust. People have to have trust in what you're doing, or it will fail. And we see that again and again with technology. And we see the fuss and furore around AI, the fear around AI, as well as the great opportunities there. And for me, it's a way of balancing that decision making. Economics, of course, is important, but economics now has to factor in the environment, for example. Otherwise, you won't have any of those chips that you need. And technology needs to factor in the ethics of what you're doing, the security of technology. It's not just about does it work, it's how does it work? And it's not just how you earn your money. It's not just how much money you earn, it's how you earn it and what's your sense of purpose. And then the final bit is the human bit. And that for me is why designers often feel so frustrated, only brought in at the end of the process, sort of industrialized as the way UX design has become just a factory for buttons. And put the hamburger at the top and do this, and there you are. You've got a UX. I mean, it doesn't ask questions anymore. It doesn't, challenge how things are, and that's what design should be doing. And of course, because design is quite challenging and says, well, why did you do that? And what was the problem you're solving? What's the question? Sometimes people don't like that, actually. And our model of leadership is usually, I will appraise the situation, I will make a decision, I will follow that decision through in some sort of weird Churchillian way, that I think is a disaster for mankind. And yet that's what we think leadership is. And designers come in and say, as you rightly say, Arnie, we don't know. We don't know. But we're going to try some experiments. We're going to make things so that you can interact with them to understand whether they work or not. And we're going to do that before you've spent the bucks and you've got your developing team in and you've got your engineering team and you've made it. We're going to do it before then, so that we reduce the risk and we understand what we're making, and we have a much higher degree of confidence that people will actually use your brilliant technology or whatever it is. Now, to me, this seems so commonsensical.
Yeah, no, exactly. So
why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah,
but of course, I live in a world where every project I've delivered virtually, especially in the commercial world when I was a designer, failed because they didn't think like that. They were determined, the CEO or whatever. I'm writing a book at the moment called Redesigning Thinking, because I think that's what we're doing. I think that's what we're doing. And of course, obviously, there's a little pun there on design thinking. I hope you'll appreciate that.
Yeah. I got it right there.
But of course, it also completely changes the emphasis. And I think essentially that's what we have to try and do. We have to calm people down, teach them to collaborate, teach them to understand the problem before they make the decision, and be comfortable with that little bit of investment of time that it requires compared to the massive cost of changing something when you delivered it and found out it doesn't work, or nobody wants it, or people are scared of it. And I think we're at a crux, fork in the road, moment of crisis, try not to waste it. And what chance do I? But because there are so many crises going on, from climate to pandemic, and I always talk about how appalling the UK pandemic reaction was, specifically around the sort of digitally led test and trace system, which, according to some people, it might be as much as £37 billion was wasted.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't designed. It wasn't perceived as a service. It wasn't perceived as needed to be designed for the people who were getting the phone calls, the people who were sitting in call centers waiting to tell people that they might have been in contact with somebody with COVID. Life-threatening situations, completely undesigned because nobody realized it needed designing. And the decisions they were making were possibly bad ones that would lead to its failure. So when you start being faced with those kind of situations, you think, right, we've really got to stop poncing around and saying, we've got some stuff here that will really help you make a better decision.
Yeah, but it also feels like you're slowing it down, which you do because you have to. And the point of that's such an interesting paradox in a way that, you need to slow down to make things better. And so my experience as well, working with lots of companies and large corporates, that, so my sense on a very human scale is that people working in large organizations, they can't go any faster. They can't do more than they're doing, but they're being asked to, and they feel they're being asked to, and they don't, they're especially in, what came out of the pandemic also is like, now they're on, 30-minute back-to-back meetings, because, it's online. So you can just switch. You don't need any transition. You can just go from one meeting to another, and they're running, and they're being they have this huge pressure because they need to speed up. Everything needs to speed up because the faster technology becomes, the faster we are going to, at least that's the idea, we have to work, which is, it should be the opposite. It should be actually the opposite. We should slow down and
Interesting.
have and there's a wonderful book. I forgot the author's name. I'm sorry, but yeah, the book is called "Leadership is Language," and there's a wonderful story that he talks about, and the way he describes sort of the need for slowing down is that if you are an open water swimmer and you're a competitive swimmer, and you have to have your head down when you want to go fast, but you don't see where you're going. And if you want to see the buoy, every
That's
now and then
nice.
you have to put your head up and say, where am I? Where are we going? Put your head up. Yes, slow down, of course, and then because otherwise you'll end up somewhere you're not supposed to be. And that kind of
Yeah.
links to me my question around responsibility, and because it's not just that, because now we're getting the sense that designers are the people who want to make things better, and they make things better if you let designers just do whatever they do. But designers can also make things worse. They're also
Oh
part of
God, yeah, yeah, yeah.
creating bad systems and evil systems and what have you. So the response, you were talking about that, right? So cause and effect, like, this kind of this idea of like, with your father, for instance, you think you're doing the right thing, but in the long term, did we actually, so sometimes, you can be worried about, what are we doing now and what is the long-term effect of things, right? So the responsibility you have as a designer is maybe that's also a new thing, because when I started getting into design, that wasn't really clear. It
No.
became rather clear when I was getting fed up with the superficial advertisement and marketing and world that I was part of, where like, this is terrible. We are not positive influence on this planet. This is because we're selling all this junk, these bad things. So like, to me, I was like, I gotta get out of here.
You remember the book
Right.
Cradle to Cradle? You remember
Credit.
the book Cradle to Cradle? It was like one of the first books. So before I studied in the Netherlands, I studied industrial design at a state university, United States. And one of our professors made us read this book, but the other professors are like, we don't know why he's making you read this book. It's a use.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, no, we've and obviously
That wasn't so long ago. So
no.
we've come a long way in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, and well, books when I was a teenager, things like Design for the Real World, were incredible, um, mind-changing, beginning to understand social impact of design, the environmental impact of design. That was very exciting to begin to realize that. But I remember in my first job, ethics, the only ethical discussions we had were, would you design for the military or a cigarette company? That was it. Well, it's got a lot more difficult than that. I think there's a few things around responsibility. I mean, the first thing I do want to say is I do not think that just giving everything to designers means everything's going to be all right. In fact, I think the opposite. But I
Yeah.
do think, I mean, the way I practice design and I believe in design is that it can help others collectively make better decisions. I think
Yeah.
that's the point. We have some things that other people don't have, that when we combine it all, we get a more
Exactly.
balanced viewpoint. That's really what I'm driving at. But in terms of responsibility, what's been very interesting in service design is, I don't know, when there was the big service design conference, I'm guessing it was about 12 years ago, Service Design Network. They had a big conference in the UK, and this was the first time I'd ever heard of service design. And we're all at the conference sharing wonderful stories. I actually remember going on stage saying, who needs another design name? This service design thing's rubbish. I can't imagine a chief executive ever asking for a service designer. Well, I'm glad to say I'm wrong. I was wrong. I'm obviously naive, but I think my point was I didn't want to have all these subsets of design, and I still don't.
Well,
Some
I
people
think you're
tell me,
right, by the way. I was
"Hmm,
I was actually against. I'm still against it, by the way. It's like, no, because the service designer to me, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but I just
no,
go,
no,
this is, I'm really passionate about this.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So because services are designed by, actually, I always say, if either everyone in a company is part
Yeah.
of the service design, or no one is. There's no
Yes.
such a service designer, because it has no definition. There's like, are you doing research? Are you a design researcher? Are you a
Mm.
facilitator? Or are you a project manager? Are you a designer? Are you, and you can be all of the above. So it becomes this superhuman being. There's, I mean, I also believe we're in an evolution of things. So I think it's okay,
Yeah.
but it's boxing things in that shouldn't. To your point, I think you were right, and I think I was
I
there,
mean,
by the way.
I see on social media people saying, "Oh, it's not service design; it's system design," and oh, it's something else. And I think it's you can't have service design without thinking about systems. What are you talking about?
Yes.
And then during my tenure at the Royal College of Art, running a course called service design, I'd tell people about it. Your very first question was, "How do you describe yourself?" And unfortunately, I would sometimes say, "I run a course called service design," and
Mhm.
people say, "Well, that's a terrible name." But it's kind of a tag, it's an identity. And if we
Yeah,
change the name, would the students know what it was? They know there's something there and they wanted to
for
come
sure.
and study it. So you kind of get stuck.
Yeah, but it's so
However,
interesting. Exactly. But it's so interesting that it's language and you get stuck, but you have to, because it's you need to interact, you need to speak, you need to be able to talk to each other. So of
yeah,
course we use the name.
you
I
need
switched
familiar
from
names.
service design, sort of selling service design services, to design thinking, because design thinking came from the US, and it had a bigger brand, or somehow, because it was
Yeah,
connected to a book and the whole thing. And I just, in all our whatever we wrote, and all our proposals, we just did the search and replace service design, design thinking,
yes,
and it's like, no, okay, who cares what it is? I want to know the problem. Then
yes.
and then I'll figure out what tool. Six Sigma, it's fine, I don't care, because there's so many amazing tools out there.
That's right.
To me, it's like,
Yeah.
every time you box things in, and this is
Mm,
my kind of my problem with Service Design Network. It's always been, and I've been part of it in the beginning, and I left because I was like, that's not what we're supposed to do.
mm,
We should include.
I
I was
agree.
part of a design thinking conference at the D School in Potsdam, and at one point I was sort of part of the organizing committee, and somehow I was like, when we were having the conference, I noticed that no one from the service design community was there. I was like, this is so weird. But there was a professor of design thinking, there's a professor of
Right.
service design, and they plant their flags. And then is like, so we're part, and I know that's the world we live in, but we need people who say, let's break down these walls again. Let's go find out. And anyway, sorry.
No, I think it's very interesting. I mean, you're right. It's language, and you kind of get stuck with it. But what I will say about service design is we got very excited about it, and we started imagining how that could be helpful. To replace products by services, for example, and how understanding that things were services and that you should orchestrate them, perhaps is the word I
Mhm.
use, make them consistent. Um, I'll tell the story in a moment about how I really discovered service design when I was at Orange Mobile. But the point is, we got very excited about it, and we would look at things like Airbnb. I talk about this a lot in my
Mhm.
lectures and talks. Liberating people's businesses. It's interesting. I read today that the tax department of the UK now wants to find out who's got a room rented somewhere and tax them for it, catching up with them. But
Mhm.
Airbnb seems amazing. We all exploit it. We go off and stay in beautiful places for a day if we want, or maybe longer. And then Uber.
Mhm.
Wow, fantastic. These horrible things called cabs. Suddenly they're part. I can see outside my window from where I am
Yeah.
today. Two or three Zipcar. Sorry. I'm getting confused. I was going to talk about Zipcar as well, but another service, the ability to hire a car because it's on the street, but the ability for Uber to simply come when I go to the gym. I
Yeah.
cannot believe how many people turn up to the gym in an Uber. Maybe you should walk. Isn't that the point? Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
getting
exactly.
everything mixed up now.
Mm.
But all these amazing services that have come in the last 12 years or so.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you realize, you see the reports of the riots in Barcelona because the neighborhoods of Barcelona have been hollowed out by
Yes.
Airbnb. and they riot. Local businesses do not thrive with that lack of community, lack of neighborhood. You see Uber in trouble in every single city in the world, whether it's driver rights or security of passengers or simply lobby groups having a go at them. But anyway, it's not plain sailing, as we would say. And there have been unintended consequences. And then that also leads me to what I love about service design is that it steals everything. You know, we most recently have stolen speculative design
Yeah.
to try and understand the future consequences of the decisions we're making about services and the unforeseen circumstances. So, you know, two things I was proud of during my time at the Royal College of Art. One was that we brought in so many different techniques to embellish that sort of toolkit of different techniques. Now, I didn't care whether they were design techniques or not. Some of them were, some of them weren't. But if they help us make better decisions. And the other thing that you were mentioning earlier is this sense of facilitation. And for me, the role of the students and service designers is not some kind of glorious magician who can sprinkle design magic dust, but can get stuck into a problem, can bring the right people around the table.
Exactly.
You know, my good friend Judah Armani, who worked with me at the Royal College, talks about design being like a dinner party. You invite really good guests and you feed them, and good stuff happens.
Exactly.
And I like that. And
Yeah.
he also talks a lot about Plato and Socrates and the idea of being an innocent and not judging a problem, but learning about something and making mistakes as well. I mean, it's all tied in together in service design, which is what I love about it, even if I don't like the title.
No, and I agree totally. I agree. I think no, but it's also it's been my own experience that I started becoming a facilitator,
Facilitate.
and so you kind of, and then you start becoming kind of responsible for kind of who or what are you connecting, and not just in designing services or product, but people and the interaction of people. So you become someone who puts people together, and beautiful things can happen.
Yeah.
But your role is to kind of make that happen and create that safe space for people. So so I think if you think about an evolution of a certain type of designer, because not all designers can be facilitators, or creatives can be facilitators, but there is a type of person kind of emerging that is that kind of connector, the bridge maker, those people who
Yeah.
say, hey, you know, and who are courageous enough, and who, they might not be a leader in a hierarchical sense, but they can be leaders. They can lead sort
Yeah.
of these kind of
I think that's right.
Yeah, and there's a huge need for that. I mean, this is what I've been doing my research on for the last almost year, or yeah, over a year and a half now, is
Yeah.
the need for these people to come in and facilitate. Because I don't know anything about specific industries, but if you can facilitate and lead that, but also from a design point of view, be able to bring all those voices to the table, that's what we're so desperately in need of right now, is society bringing these shifts and these changes towards things.
Exactly right. Exactly right. You touched on two interesting things there. One is you're absolutely right. There's lots of designers who are in it for their own creativity. And I'm not dissing that. You know, we do need the world to be beautiful. We do need people to care about the ease of an interface. But we also need people who understand that these design methods are transferable and you can go and make bigger and better decisions. But the other counterintuitive, there's so many counterintuitive things in what we talk about in design, is that if you don't have an expertise in something except design methods, you can still walk into very strange organizations and you have to convince them that you can do this. And that's our challenge. So one of the things I've learned in the last few years that I really enjoy, and it's basically what I'm doing most of the time now, apart from writing my book. Publisher, I am writing it, don't worry. um, is training, and I've discovered how much I love training, and I'm just about to do my last executive training class for the Royal College of Art, but I have been training to some amazing organizations over the years and continue to do that. So the most extreme one was a year and a half ago. I was invited to do design training in the Bank of England with the Financial Conduct Authority and big banks, and they were talking about data, and I had no idea what they were talking about. But We went through the processes. We did all the stuff we do. There was one point I remember, this senior economist lady who was just the brightest person I've ever met, just looked at me and said, "What you've just made me do, I hated so much." And then I realized it was brilliant.
Yeah.
And how important it was.
That's so
It was a
cool.
dodgy moment, I tell you.
Yeah,
I was
yeah, I know.
nervous at that moment.
Yeah.
And then, I mentioned it earlier on. I just spent last week at a fire station working with the fire and rescue service. I
Yeah.
don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
And they were pretty nervous of me walking in. Somebody had some faith, luckily, that we could do something. And we rocked and rolled. We just had the best time. We solved apparently insolvable problems. Fingers crossed they can go off and now do that. Of course, there's barriers. Of course, there's obstacles. There's people who won't believe them. But that becomes the problem. Opening the door, getting people to trust us to go in when we don't know about their world, but we can help them.
Yeah, but as long as you don't pretend to know about that, I mean, that's the worst thing that can happen, is that you feel that you need to know. It's actually not knowing, which allows you to ask questions that they're not asking anymore. And often, so my experience is like, if I ask someone, like, they use some kind of word, or I just don't understand what they're saying, I can ask the question, and often then other people in the room go like, "Oh, I never talked about that," or, "Oh, I thought it meant something else," or actually,
Yeah.
"Oh," so because they take it for granted. You need outsiders. You need those people to come in and go like, "What is this all about? Why are you?" Because, it's a known thing, right? That and some companies make use of that. That if you get a new employee, for instance, in the first few weeks, to them everything is new, and they see things that other people don't see anymore. So I think there was a story around 3M, for instance, that they would kind of connect a new employee to a manager, and then not to kind of to tell the new person to kind of to teach them, but to ask them questions like, "What do you see? What do you see? What
Yeah.
what do you notice?" And then, because that's so interesting, because you
Yeah.
go like, "Huh." We don't, because that's an outsider, like you said, you go into this world that you don't know anything about, and you're like, "What's is amazing?" Like, what is it going on? And but it takes courage, because that's when I teach facilitators, people who want to go into facilitation, their biggest obstacle is that they think they need to know everything about the industry, and they don't want to, because they don't want to be stupid, they don't want to, be ignorant. But actually, I say, just say, "I don't know," but you have experience. You take that with you, and it's about human connections and about asking questions, be genuine, and don't pretend to know stuff. And if you're nervous, say you're nervous. That's okay. We're human beings. It's okay. And it's so fascinating that
Yeah.
we need to be
Right.
experts.
Absolutely. I don't understand how you can get an MBA or a science degree without understanding design principles and methods. I do not understand how that's happened. It should not have happened. I never want to talk to another designer again. I want to talk to somebody doing an MBA. I want to talk to somebody. And interestingly, at the Royal College, because they had connections with things like London Business School and Imperial College, there were connections into there. But how sustainable are they? Is this just an interesting thing to do whilst you're studying? I'm not sure people take it into their heart, and we don't practice it enough. And you mentioned America, actually. You mentioned the design thinking in the US. I was there almost a year ago talking, evangelizing about service design. And they had no idea what I was talking about,
Oh,
which is surprising. America, service and everything. But for them, design thinking, for example, was all about innovation and profit, finding another new little trinket thing. So
definitely.
the idea of using design thinking to help your public sector, for example, be more efficient is quite alien to quite a lot. Though, interestingly, Biden did a couple of years ago put a call out to designers to come and solve some of the big challenges of government. And of course, Obama, having finally got Obamacare in, then did such a terrible job of designing it that it didn't work really. And I need to study that for my book, actually, because I think, again, it's not just about making the right political decision. You have to design it well. And so we come full circle, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That surprises me, though, that the in the States they didn't really fully understand service design. Because
No, I mean, I think the question I often heard was, well, where's the money in it? Well,
that sounds more like it. Yeah.
and of course, I mean, one of the problems with service design is you are very often fixing the basics, as we used to call it.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
I was at Barclays Bank, it was a fascinating journey. Where I was originally running sort of digital programs, and there was a massive design resource within Barclays, hundreds of designers on the 22nd floor of Canary Wharf, Barclays Towers, that then, when a new chief executive came in, disappeared almost overnight.
Wow.
And then I was sort of embedded inside the industry, managed to start up what we would now call service design in Barclays. But I had to do it by solving complaints. There were some really big complaint numbers, as there are in all banks. And everyone had been trying to fix them in very traditional ways. And we used design thinking, design methods to get to the bottom of it. And we solved them, and everyone went, wow. So what happens? You end up with every complaint trying to solve it. And it's quite difficult to retain staff, to
Yeah.
retain designers when all you're doing is, oh, here's another bloody thing wrong. We got to fix it. And that is an issue with service design. And some of the best service design I've seen is in the public sector, where they're repairing things that have been set up with all the best intentions, but simply don't work. And again, that's tough for a young creative designer, isn't it? You can sleep better because you know you're fixing, I don't know, social services or the homeless or the prison service, which I think is a massive driver to those kinds of designers. But at the same time, you kind of want to do something new, don't you? You want to sort of do what you did at college, have a blank piece of paper, imagine, big ideas and try and deliver them. And I wish we again had more ambition. I still think that the main purpose of design is to raise people's ambition, to realize they could do better, and then show them how to do that. Visualize it. It's what we do, isn't it? We visualize stuff. We envision what better looks like, and then we try and build it. And of course, there'll always be a lot of people who say, oh, we tried it last year and it didn't work, or oh, that's, we haven't got a hope. It's going to cost money or something. But again, we need to be more creative about making business cases, about moving to the new challenges that are there. I'm working with a really big company at the moment who make lots of stuff. And we've gone in, I'm part of a small group of advisors, and we've gone in and talked about things like AI and the environment and inclusivity. And they're not a British company, let me put it like that. And they've listened, and they are changing their entire strategy because of what we've said, which is pretty scary, actually, and very surprising. But we're actually on a journey together, and it's given me great hope. And I do hope that collectively, we will move them to a more sustainable in every sense position that will allow them to survive.
Yeah.
But if they don't do anything, they won't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously the incentive. But what if you don't? Right.
Yes, that's right. That's right. But a lot of people are far too comfortable, far too well incentivized to seriously want change. Oh, I'll be retired by then. Someone else's problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm being cruel, but sometimes it feels like that.
Well, I think it's interesting though, because I think you need to. So if people work in change, in innovation, in design, and anything, when connected to change, whether you're an insider or an outsider, where you're, I work as a contractor, for instance, for a large American business, and as an outsider, it's you need to kind of have some patience, or at least look at the bigger picture of things, because you can be really frustrated at times, because these big systems, they basically will defend itself. And it's not the people. Often it's not the humans in it, because they're smart. All the time, actually, they're smart enough. They get it, right? But it's that system that they're part of that kind of creates that behavior that you need to change. So it is a long-term investment. And I think we are still suffering from the Industrial Revolution, although we think that's such a long time ago, but actually we're still there. And a lot of these systems are still kind of, created in this, either the spirit of that time, or we're actually from that time. We're still in this pyramids structure of
Yeah,
businesses. So I think
really
if you zoom out and look over time, there is a change happening. And I think service design thinking,
mm,
agile, lean startup, theory
mm,
I don't, you name it. We're all trying to kind of somehow create a language to kind of be part of, or at least describe that change that's
yeah,
happening. But the change is not service design. The change is not design thinking. That's not the change.
no,
There's something else we're trying to kind of put a language on.
agree.
And
I think it's a great point you're making, actually. And no, it's not. Again, I don't want to say designers are somehow white knights coming in and saving the world. It's not that at all. But and thank you for reminding me that I am an optimist, believe it or not. No, I'm a tremendous optimist. And I remember when I was back at Orange, the leadership at Orange used to boast about how they could code, right? And they thought this was really cool. And I thought it was really stupid. Because it didn't help them with their customers. They did not understand their customers. They had no idea about the terrible customer journey, their customers. They were using phones, mobile phones that were provisioned by their kind of carers, if I can call them that, executive carers. So they had no idea the problems everyone else had when they were trying to set a phone up or travel abroad or whatever it was. They were completely, but they could code, great. Now that has gone, or is going fast. And I have great confidence in a younger generation of leaders, post Google, post Apple,
yeah.
who understand the emotional side of technology, the need for things like trust, who understand and require social good, community, social, societal good, not just user good, a broader thing, who understand and take the environment seriously and understand that that's going to have an economic impact if we're not careful. So there are very tangible reasons to think differently. And that younger generation, um, when I was at the Royal College, we had a little birthday party for the course. It was 10 years old. And somebody said, well, if you're so smart, why aren't there chief executives from this course? And it's like, well, it's only 10 years old. If you were in the first tranche, you've only been in your job 10 years. Nobody's a chief executive unless it's your own startup and you call yourself a chief executive. That's different. Nobody's heading up, and anything under 20, 30 years. So it's still a journey we're on. And I think that generation of leaders, and then the ones behind them, you're absolutely right in saying we're still connected to the Industrial Revolution, but I think that is shifting to the fourth Industrial Revolution, which is one of data and technology. And maybe the fifth is not AI, but maybe it's the human revolution. It's about, how are we going to have a role in the world when AI is giving us all the answers? What are we going to do in the world? How are we going to, yes, make it better? And that's where things are getting interesting. The ideas that interest me are things like the 4-day week. There's quite a lot of that in the design industry. COVID has bust the relationship between office and work, and I think a healthy way, frankly. I know not all agree with me, but I do think that the social value of meeting people is bloody important, and I miss it when I don't have it, but there's a balance. And then onwards to things like universal credits and what might have seemed really radical, virtually communist ideas suddenly are being discussed because we want the world to work. We can't just let everybody drown in the rising sea levels and not be able to eat. So there's some pretty big problems over there. Oh yeah, and back to where we started. We need creative solutions. Human-centered creative solutions. That's what we lack. So let's keep educating people, all people. When I was at the Design Council 23 years ago, whenever it was, we were teaching design through history and geography, not just woodworking. And I railed against the demise of design technology, where it's gone back just to be a kind of workshop thing. We need accountants who understand design. We need politicians who understand. We need doctors who understand design. It's not a little luxury thing in the corner. And I know I'm nowhere, none of us are anywhere near persuading politicians that yet, but we have to. We actually have to, because that's how we'll make better decisions. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah, and we
Pause for
do
breath.
it. We do it. Yeah, no, I so agree with you. But I think this links to training.
Mm.
At least for me, I do believe that change happens one conversation at a time, and
Yeah.
um, and I think, and I'm not sure if that's for you, the same for you, but for me, when I started teaching and training, I started realizing that I could actually make a very direct impact. I can, just a person, and I can teach them something new, or give them sort of some kind of insight, or give them an option that they didn't even consider. And that will lead to their change, but they will then influence someone else. And through training and teaching, I think that's a really powerful way forward.
Yeah, I do agree. And that's why I love it so much, to see people go on a journey in just 2 days, you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
to, to have more ideas than they've ever had in their life in half an hour.
Yeah.
uh,
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
share, to show each other their work
Yeah.
and get feedback, which they've never done before in their lives. These are extraordinary. And I love it and I hate it because it's so unscalable.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to spend the rest of my life, every day of my life, and I might get to do it for a few hundred people. And I think
Yeah.
that's maybe we can benignly infect them.
Yeah. But you don't
Tell their
know how.
friends, hey, you could do this.
No, but listen, your impact is, the scalability of it is that
Mm.
you talk about pandemic, you infect someone, right, and they will infect someone
Benign.
else. But yeah, a benign infection, but it happens. I mean, and even though you sometimes don't even realize it,
Yeah.
a friend of mine, he's retired now, but he used to be a teacher, and he said this great thing to me. He said, every now and then he would meet a former student of his, and he said sometimes they come up to me and say, "Oh, I remember your lessons. What's really important for me now." And then he was like, "But you were in the back of the class. You did not pay attention. You were really I was where you were annoying, and now you're telling me that what I told you."
Just
Because it made sense
okay.
later, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I think you'll
Mm.
and so the best thing to do is sometimes go back to people who you trained like years ago.
Yeah.
It happens every now and then to me as well. Every now and then I meet someone, and we did a project at a company like 8 years ago, and and every now and then I have this moment where I meet them again, and they'll say, "Oh, the thing you did there, that became that, and it became this amazing thing." And I'm like, "Oh, oh wow, I changed something." you
Yeah.
know what? And I wasn't there, which is the best. You infected, you did something, you planted seeds. So you're planting seeds. You are, and that's through training. And so you might
Yeah.
not know it, but I think the influence you have is way bigger than you think.
I hope that's true for all of us. I think that's true. I mean, I think that's why I'm want to write the book. In fact, and I wrote a book 22 years ago about product design. And
Yep.
just a few weeks ago, someone came up and said, I got your book when I was a student and it changed my life. I thought,
There you go.
really?
See? Yeah. See?
And that was very humbling. But I think that's why I'm determined to write the book. But that's also the scary part of writing a book, because it better be good. People better get it. If they don't, I'm
Yeah.
screwed.
Yeah, because the book is forever. Book is forever. It's
Books forever.
printed. It's you can't edit it and kind of delete it and
Oh,
republish. It's
no,
there's
I
no.
know. I
It's
know. It's pretty
there.
scary.
Yeah,
I
it
think it's
is.
going to be
But
great. And you start writing, think, is anyone going to read this rubbish? Well, hate me up.
yeah, that's a whole different topic. I don't know anymore. But just to kind of make the point one more time. I mean, when we met years ago at Barclays, I was part of this group, and I remember what you said.
Oh, yeah.
I repeated it, and it made impact. Right? It did something, and I was like, huh. It gave me a new insight into how you could also think as a business. And
Mm.
and so, you know, I'm also very optimistic in the sense of new generations, not just new generations, but, you know, people in general.
Mm.
Also, you know, our generation, we want to do things differently as well. And I remember talking to this lady from HR from L'Oreal, and she said, you know, Arne, every day is a marathon, and in this company. And I said, well, you know, and that because they were struggling with keeping talent in the company, and I said, well, there's going to be new generations, and because, you know, they just need, their relationship with work is different, so it's difficult to keep them because it's part of their self-identity. It's not just security. And she said, it's not just new generations, or it's just we all are fed up with this. And I thought, oh yeah, me too. Oh, you're right. Yeah, you're true. Yes, yes, you're right.
Well, there
And
you
I
go.
mean,
There you go.
yeah, right. And so there's so many people out there like us who
Mm.
say we need to change things. And I think
Mm.
maybe we should kind of you know, have a collective voice in this or something,
Mm.
because and you must have the same experience. I'm meeting so many people out there with so much experience, uh, um, who are saying, I don't want to be part of this big political system again. I want to
Mm.
change that. You know, but you know, but how? And so
Yeah.
I think it's going to change.
And you reminded me that, you know, because we have a propensity to want to design and make things,
Mhm.
that sometimes we have to leave alone as well,
Yeah.
which we always forget. And I think that's where the legitimate criticism of design. And I remember a previous head of the Royal Society of Art saying designers were the source of all evil because, you know, we made stuff and the world didn't need any more stuff. And he's kind of right. You know, it's like my wife used to blame me for all the remote controls we had when I worked for Samsung. I said, it's not my fault.
Oh, it was you. Oh,
Yeah, every single product has to have its own remote control. So you've got a pile
yeah.
of 10 remote controls on your dining
Yeah,
room, in your
with
living
a
room.
gazillion buttons on it.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I think you have to have a real holistic view. But I think the kind of design we're talking about is about having that holistic view, isn't it? And making, as I say, better decisions. And yeah, redesigning thinking. Just get a little plug in at the end there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. That's good. That's actually a good point, and to end on.
Mhm.
I think we can talk forever, by the way, because there's so many other things that I actually wanted to ask you, but
Sorry.
this is no, absolutely not. No,
That's
it's
how they
great.
always go. We meet someone fascinating and then we
You
just
let it go. Good.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Thank you for the insights and the stories. It's wonderful to have you here on the podcast. And yeah, so thanks.
Well, I've absolutely loved every moment. Thank you. You've been huge fun to talk to. Thank you. And as you say, we could go on forever. But no, and thank you for even thinking of me and inviting me. It's been real pleasure. Thank you.